So today we have a Final Fantasy VII Rebirth news blowout as Yoshinori Kitase and Naoki Hamaguchi have sat down with a few different Japanese outlets to talk about the PC version of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, as well as things like multi-platform exclusivity, and they even give us a little bit of information on 7 Remake Part 3, one from Kitase that involves Nomura in the game's ending. So you'll want to stick around for that. So if any of that sounds cool to you, feel free to click the like button, and if you're new here and you'd like to help support the channel, you can subscribe, and as always, leave your thoughts in the comments down below. So starting off first with Famitsu. Now all of these are in Japanese and they've been auto-translated by Google, so there might be some weird translations here or there, but I'll try my best to fix those as we read these quotes. Starting off first, they talk about the overall reception to Rebirth now that the game has been out for a full year. Kitase goes on to say, "I felt that the dev team led by Hamaguchi had made something good, but I was worried about how it would resonate with players and game fans because it was a remake and the second in a trilogy. In the end, I was happy to receive such positive reviews that it overcame those concerns. I also felt that the game was supported by not only players, but also the media, including overseas. There are many people who played the original FF7 and became involved in the game industry because of it. And I think that the feelings of those people led to this result." Hamaguchi then chimes in by saying, as Kitase mentioned, this was the second in a trilogy, so its position is very important. If the game part of the second part was the same as Remake, but the story was different, interest in the third part would cool. And I gotta say, from my perspective, I think they did a fantastic job with Rebirth. Whatever fears they may have had clearly were squashed when the game came out because it was very well received. Again, we're talking 110 perfect review scores when the game released, a 90 I believe on Metacritic. The PC version is sitting at a 90 currently as well. And speaking on what Hamaguchi says, he's absolutely right. We've stressed this in a number of different videos, but you really have to improve upon each installment and really escalate things, not just with the story, but with the gameplay. Go from very linear in Remake to somewhat open world-ish in Rebirth. And then by the time we get to part 3, they're gonna blast open those doors and it's gonna be a free-for-all with the high wind, all these different chocobos. That's when I think they're really gonna let things loose for part 3, and it's going to be super exciting. Up next, they ask the devs about how there are some people out there that don't want to play Rebirth or even Remake until this entire trilogy is finished. So what do they have to say about that? Kitase then says, "I myself sometimes watch movies in one go after they've finished, and while there's the benefit of being able to experience the story in a continuous stream, I also feel a sense of waste thinking, why didn't I watch the first one when it was released?" He continues by saying, "When I search for the reactions from back then, I sometimes feel regretful, thinking, wow, it was so popular, or why didn't I get on that bandwagon? So I hope that game fans will not only enjoy the time they spend playing the game, but also the time they spend waiting for it." Which I think is 100% accurate. I think we've all had those experiences in life where we either miss out on a video game series or a TV series or movies, and then we watch them at a later date when they've kind of cooled off a little bit and we become enamored with them and we're like, holy crap, I missed out on this, I missed out on all the hype and conversation from when this thing was at its height. And while you get to experience everything in one go, there is that, that FOMO that you kind of start to experience of, man, I really wish I would have jumped on this bandwagon sooner. And we've talked about this with the 7 Remake trilogy, but I really feel like this might be a bit of a slow burn trilogy where you do have those people who are hesitant to jump on board with even Remake because they know this is a trilogy, and they're gonna wanna wait until all 3 parts are available before they actually start playing things. So while the reactions to things like Rebirth right now are really good and really positive, I think once part 3 comes out, you're really gonna start to see a lot more people playing through Remake and Rebirth and making videos or posts on the internet saying, damn, I really missed out. Why didn't I play this sooner? It's really awesome. And then hopefully, by the time part 3 does come out, there's a bit of a resurgence for this series and people really start to show it even more love. And if they can stick the landing on part 3, I think part 3 might be the best and potentially the most successful of the bunch, especially if we, move into the multi-platform stuff. And while it does suck to wait for part 3, it's really exciting because we all as fans get to talk about about, man, what are they going to do in part 3? And whenever an interview comes out or some type of event takes place, we all get super excited to watch it or read it and then talk about it. It really builds up that hype and anticipation that I think is just so much fun to experience. Now up next, they talk about the creation of 7 Remake using an HDD and how for Rebirth they use the SSD and how using an SSD might actually make the wait for 7 Remake Part 3's PC port a little bit shorter. Hamaguchi goes on to say, the logic of drawing is quite different from HDD. Until HDD, the design was to read all the scenes the player is currently in and then reread them at some point, but SSDs read quickly, so you can design it so that the data is read and discarded at each moment. That's a pretty drastic change. The third game will also be developed with SSDs in mind, with a design relatively close to the current situation. So I think the time between the release of the third game's consumer version and the release of the PC version will be shorter. And to quote Street Fighter Third Strike, yeah, that makes sense. You know, again, I've stressed this in many videos, but Rebirth was their first full PS5 game, so obviously there's going to be some hiccups and things to get used to, but now it really sounds like the devs have kind of mastered that SSD and figured out how to use it properly and quickly to develop their games, which allowed them to make the PC version at a much faster rate. And now that they have even more experience, the wait for that PC version on Part 3, barring any Sony exclusivities, should in fact be shorter because they actually know what they're doing now, which is super cool. Hamaguchi also goes on further to talk about the game's revamped lighting on PC by saying, in recent years, as 3D has become more realistic and physically based, the lighting process can make a big difference in how well a model or scene looks. When we were thinking about where to spend our money to reach out to users when releasing the PC version, we decided that it would be best to review and revise the lighting environment. We also had a lot of complaints about characters' faces looking scary when they were under trees or in the shadows. This has also been improved in the PC version. And even on the PC version, reading some of the reviews, there are some people that say that while the lighting is improved, it still does need some work. It still is a little bit wonky in some areas, but in regards to the scary faces, it's 100% right. If you angle Cloud just right and the lighting is hitting his face just right, he looks super spooky, he looks kind of scared, and he looks like he's seen some shit. It's kind of funny, but it does look weird. But again, these are moments that last maybe for a couple of seconds and then you move on and the rest of the game looks gorgeous. Now with the PC version getting all of these great upgrades, will it be possible to bring those upgrades to the PS5 version at a later date? Hamaguchi would say, when we released the promotional video for the PC version, we received a lot of requests for a similar update for the PS5 version, and we would like to make this happen at some point within the limits of the PS5 version's performance. Which I personally would really love to see. Again, I'm playing the game again on a Pro and it looks really, really good. Of course, you still have things like texture pop in and weird lighting, which aren't going to be fixed based on the PS5 because it's an Unreal Engine game, and sometimes that's just how those games function on a console because these engines weren't meant to be for open world games. But if they can bring some sort of improvements to the PS5 version, that would be sick. But again, you're really limited in what you can do on the PS5 hardware, so they might not be able to implement all of the good, beautiful stuff that the PC version has. However, I've also stressed this in previous videos, I really hope that they take the experience that they had making Rebirth on PS5 and porting it to PC, and they can hopefully apply all of those lighting and graphical upgrades to Remake Part 3 and make sure that it looks and performs the best that it possibly can. Now up next, we talk about 7 Remake Part 3, how is development going, and what is the scenario situation, and apparently, what's Nomura going to do because he's going to be involved as well. Hamaguchi goes on to say, it's going very well. We started working on the third game right after Rebirth ended, and we have a build that will confirm what we should aim for as a game by the end of 2024. And we can already see the direction of where we will land, so we have been working towards that goal since the beginning of this year. We are progressing without any delay from the schedule we planned when we launched the Remake project, so we hope you will look forward to it. Now again, this article was done last year, so he's talking about the beginning of 2024. So to know that they already have a build up and running of what they want the game to be is super cool, and I would assume that the next part of that process would be actually structuring things out, filling out the world, getting all of those nitty-gritty details really ironed out and then implemented. but the fact that development is going really smoothly is a really good sign, and I hope that means that they can get part 3 out early 2027 to kind of coincide with that 30th anniversary of FF7. Now up next, they ask Kitase about the game's scenario, since we do know that the full scenario has been completed. However, Kitase name drops Nomura in a very interesting fashion in regards to the game's ending. So Kitase goes on to say, the next one is the final installment, so I gave it to Nomura, who is the creative director of Rebirth, as homework to conclude the remake project, while respecting the original and providing a sense of satisfaction that wasn't felt in the original. That was finally completed at the end of the year, and the scenario for the 3rd installment was completed there. Now that actually did take me by surprise. Now again, these articles are machine AI translated via Google, so I kept checking, was this a typo? Was this a mistranslation? Because we know that Nojima is the scenario writer. He's the one in charge of all of the writing, but it would make sense that everyone would at least have a hand in crafting the ending. So according to Kitase in this article and the translation, Nomura is going to have a hand in concluding this trilogy, which might worry some people, but Nomura was also the main director of 7 Remake, and that game came out great. Sure, there was some weird stuff here and there, but I think they at least understand that they have to nail the ending of this game. It has to feel satisfactory, and they can't drop the ball. And we do know, based on previous interviews, and Kitase reiterates it here, they really do want this ending of the trilogy to feel more complete and satisfying. Because if you look at the ending of the OG FF7, it is kind of left up to interpretation based on the player. Meteor's about to hit the planet, Holy isn't working properly, the life stream pops up, and we learn that Aerith, through the power of the life stream, is able to stop Meteor, and then we end on flashes of all the characters' faces, and then we focus on Aerith, we get that really beautiful music, and then the game ends. So it's a little ambiguous for just that game. So what would they change at the end of this one? I think is to provide an ending that is mostly happy. I don't know if Aerith will be revived and be able to live on with the party. I don't know if the same will happen with Zack, but I think there will be a much more conclusive ending to this story. It won't just kind of end ambiguously. Kitase would then go on to say, at least I'm very satisfied with it, so I'm sure it will be a conclusion that will satisfy the fans as well. So that's pretty exciting, again, to know that everyone pretty much is going to have a hand in this ending. Again, they know how big of a deal this is. They can't drop the ball and screw this up. So if Kitase, who's someone who's very honest in his interviews, if he says that he's confident in the scenario and he really likes what they have planned out, then I think it's going to be good. And again, one thing I want to point out is that in previous interviews with Kitase and Hamaguchi, Hamaguchi-san in particular has been very confident, whether it was talking about Rebirth or now leading up to Remake Part 3. He's been telling people this game is going to be good. Like, dude, listen to me. The hype is real. We think it's going to be one of the best games ever made. And that is very rare because, again, Japanese developers are usually very modest and they go around saying like, oh, we worked really hard. We hope you enjoy our game. Please check it out. Stuff like that. So if a Japanese developer is going out there and being super confident, then what they're working on is probably really good. So up next, we move over to 4gamer.net, who continues the conversation with the developers, and they start off talking about things getting lost in translation and how they do a ton of interviews, and are they ever shocked to hear what one another says. Kitase goes on to say, today we are together, but we are also interviewed individually. So when I see those articles or videos, I find out Hamaguchi said this. He proceeds to laugh. However, 4gamer then says, do you ever think I didn't mean it that way? Hamaguchi says, well, that's true, especially when translation is added, the nuance changes. For example, there is a line from Cloud's mother that says, you know, I think you'd be best suited to a girl who's a bit of an older sister and who can really lead you. In Japanese, the nuance is something like, I think Cloud would be better suited to an active girlfriend. However, the overseas version didn't translate that much, so I was asked about this line by overseas media. My answer at the time was translated and the nuance changed, and as a result, some overseas fans interpreted it as Cloud and Aerith have a sisterly love, not a romantic relationship. Hamaguchi continues by saying, furthermore, I received direct messages on SNS from overseas fans about this statement saying things like, what do you mean? Please tell me what you think. 4Gamer then chimes in by saying there's no way for me to answer that as an individual, where Hamaguchi continues by saying, yes, I would like to make it clear once again that we creators will never publicly announce things like Cloud likes Tifa or no, he likes Aerith outside of the game. Since everything is expressed in the game, we cannot answer any questions. Please understand. Hamaguchi, say it louder for the people in the back. And this is a really big thing, and it's kind of ironic because we're doing a machine translated article right now, so there might be some things lost in translation, but he's 100% correct. Sometimes things are taken out of context, you don't have the nuance of the language there to back up what's being said, or maybe it gets mistranslated. And I know what article he's talking about. It's an article from Inverse that we didn't cover on the channel, but Hamaguchi had described Cloud and Aerith's relationship, with Aerith kind of being like the older sister type that kind of helps Cloud find his way, which of course upsets that specific section of the internet, the shippers out there. And again, what Hamaguchi is saying is 100% right. Just pay attention to the story. The game tells you everything you need to know about the characters and the relationships, how people feel. It's all in the game. They're never going to come out and just pick a side because A, they probably don't care about that, but B, it's not relevant to the story. And you have so many shippers out there, the toxic shippers rather, who just get really out of control with this stuff. And they end up treating these characters like they're real human beings. And the amount of times I've come across the For You page on Twitter by complete accident because that app is a complete mess, and I'll see someone tweet out, oh my god, Tifa's such a horrible friend to Aerith. I can't believe she would hold Cloud's hand in front of her like that. That's so mean. She's cruel. And I'm like, they're fictional characters, people. This isn't real. And also, don't hurt your back reaching that far. Again, the game tells you everything you need to know, so people just really need to cool down, take a breather, touch some grass, play the game. Simple as that. And also, leave the developers alone. There's no conspiracy theory where the developers are purposely trying to poke at you because you love Cloud and Aerith or you love Cloud and Tifa. I see it all the time in the responses to Ever Crisis stuff. Oh my god, why didn't X character get X amount of outfits? You're treating this character better than this character because you prefer this ship. It's insane. I hate it. Now up next, 4Gamer asks them, why not release the PS5 versions in the PC version at the same time, especially since the PC market in Japan is growing pretty rapidly. Hamaguchi goes on to say, first of all, the Final Fantasy brand and franchise, and by extension Square Enix, have built a very good partnership with Sony Interactive Entertainment, SIE. I strongly hope that this will continue in the future. However, it is true that the trend in the world is that the benefits of limiting the platform on which you play games to a specific hardware are no longer the only big thing. In fact, there are more and more SIE titles being released not only for PlayStation 5, but also PC. We realized this through the Remake project, and the company has announced that it will steer toward multi-platform development. Since future new IP will be developed along that line, I personally believe that it is inevitable that the consumer and PC versions will be released at the same time, or that both will be released as close together as possible, which I think will take place after Part 3 comes out. I think all Square Enix games from that point forward will launch on PS5, Switch 2, Xbox, and PC on day and date. It's a little trickier with the Remake trilogy because of that exclusivity deal with Sony, and we don't know how things changed behind the scenes, because looking at 7 Remake, that was supposed to be exclusive to PS4 for a year. However, a year came and went, a few more months passed, and there was never an announcement for an Xbox version or even the PC version, which led many people, including myself, to think that something else must have happened behind the scenes. Maybe Sony found a way to extend that deal, add a little bit more money maybe, to keep the game a PlayStation 5 console exclusive. But now things are starting to change, with Square Enix restructuring and realizing in order to make their money back and reach more players, they need to be multi-platform as soon as possible. There might be a situation where Part 3 could maybe launch day and date on PS5, on PC, Switch 2, and Xbox. which I hope is the case. I really hope there isn't an exclusivity window for Part 3. I just really hope that game can reach as many people as possible, because I really do, again, think it's going to be the best of the bunch. But the thing that's refreshing is that the developers know, and even the big people at the top of Square Enix realize, yeah, we can't be doing these exclusives anymore. Sure, it's great in the short term, but in the long term, it actually does hurt us. So we need to get these games on as many platforms in front of as many people as possible. So it is nice to know that they realize that now. Now, reaching the end here, they do talk about 7 Remake again. However, Hamaguchi just reiterates what he said in the Famitsu interview. However, he does add a little bit more context by saying, I can't say when the next information will be available, but please look forward to it. Now, according to, I believe it was Motomu Toriyama, who is one of the directors of Ever Crisis, he kind of let it slip late last year that we should be getting more information on Part 3 by the time the second anniversary for Ever Crisis hits. And that anniversary will be in September of this year. So by September of 2025, we should have somewhat more info on Remake Part 3. Maybe we'll actually have the name and a teaser to go along with it. And Kitase also chimes in by saying, with a big RPG project with a story, the speed of development changes depending on whether the story itself is solidified or not. As for the story of the third work, I asked Mr. Nojima, who is the scenario writer, to give me a little bit more fulfillment as a final chapter, and I brushed it up. It was completed successfully the other day, so I think it's progressing smoothly. And after reading what Kitase says there about how he also brushed up some stuff on the ending, it's got me thinking a little bit more about what we covered earlier in the video with Nomura having a hand in the ending. Now, we know that Nojima is the one who's writing this game, especially when it comes to the dialogue, all of the scenario work, that's his brainchild. But someone like Nomura might be handling it from like an outline perspective, where they're kind of putting bullet points of what needs to go where, how things are going to be structured, and eventually how things in the story, in that ending, are going to be implemented in a gameplay format, which is something that Hamaguchi-san has talked about in previous interviews about how Nojima writes the scenario and then it's up to them to figure out, okay, how do we turn this into a gameplay thing? So I think that might be what they're talking about here with Nomura's involvement. So he's going to have a hand in structuring that ending. How does it work from a gameplay perspective? What's the outline going to be? And we will end on this. There has been some chatter, some fear that since 7 Remake released on PS4 and Rebirth released on PS5, does that mean that Remake Part 3 will release on the PlayStation 6? The devs go on to clarify by saying, starting with Kitase, no, you can rest assured about the next one. He laughs. Hamaguchi then says, as I said earlier, we will release future titles on a wide range of platforms so that more people can play them. I can't promise anything at this point, but we want many people to play the games we create, so we will do our best. Which makes sense. I'm pretty sure Part 3, and Kitase just confirms it there, will be on PlayStation 5, but I would not be shocked if once the PlayStation 6 comes out, there's some sort of remastered version of the trilogy. They clean up 7 Remake, maybe add some quality of life stuff, do the same thing with Rebirth and Part 3, and they sell it as a triplet pack, where you can experience the entire trilogy in one go on the PlayStation 6, on the next Xbox, potentially on the Switch 2 and PC. You could just call it Final Fantasy VII, the Remake. Boom! You can have that one for free, Square. So with that being said, that is the video. It was a long one, but we had a lot of news to go over and stuff to discuss that is always really, really fun, especially when they give us tidbits on Part 3. Any little grain they give us will cause people like me to kind of go, ooh, what are they saying? As I rub my hands like Birdman did in that one music video, licking my lips, getting all excited. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below about what we covered in today's video. I am Curious Corduroy. I'm gonna go rest my voice because I am currently losing it. I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.